The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of culture brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation. Simply the almighty leadership of insightful craftwork that stands to build through any confrontation born to be. Yet his duty is his daily duty is as a journalist that questions properly and uses his ears to filter the real. And as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. This is the Power Right Show at S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life with the home sewn garment, the Boricua with the build, the true and living God stepping in score. Sunyazala, aka S.STREET Low, and we're on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media, where every intrigue will have its own show, every incredible thought will have its own episode, and every timeless insight will be archived. Whew. And as we go through it, though, this is the only show, I keep saying, about my element of hip-hop. What I like to call the writer of art on art and science on music. So we're writing artistic pieces about the art that we are inspired by, and in the process giving you that science on music, real details of what we thought about the music, appreciating it to its fullest. That's the number one main job we try to have, and depreciating it, you know what I mean, if it's got to be depreciated, man. You know what I mean? I got my book out, The Filtered Real Essays from the Invisible Renaissance. So, yo, definitely, go get that. Amazon, or DM me on Instagram, Sunez, S-U-N-E-Z, or Twitter, Sunez7, the number 7. You know what I mean? And, a little art on art recital, man. This is called Baji Chu. This is off introducing our guest for today. Darker than them last 7 ounces of Baji 2 lay on the timetable of their fables. Sip carefully for the minute the chi meets the muscle to the motions of the edict. The nerve of these niggas, popping chantix while they smoke the mirrors. So I let butterflies rumble through my abs, sharply through loosened frog buttons. Vocables that perforate the claims. The levels breached were purchased for droppings, and the envelopes they pushed were sealed statements of musical malintent. The fawner to his own fame is in his own falling when the timetable bows in fin. Only the principles etched into with shine in her curtsy. The words that write in the groove slow her to endlessness, all at the head of the table, S.STREET indents himself calmly. There's always a space for the truth upon the imperative mood, higher. You know, I wrote that for the guest we're going to have on the phone today. His name is A-Preem, the god A-Preem. I'm trying to really reach out to all these great MCs that aren't in New York, you know what I mean? Since we're on that COVID tip, you know what I'm saying? See what we could do and really build with brothers I've always wanted to build with, and on the same level of all these great guests that we get in the building here. And one of the great MCs of today calls himself the Rabid Wolf, the War God, the Divine Executioner. A-Preem out of Chicago. The God has been making really rough music, and probably the epitome of hardcore music. Right now, I would say that an MC can only be as hardcore as A-Preem. They can't really be more hardcore than him, you know? Like, I was having a conversation about G-Rap and stuff. I would say all the techniques come from G-Rap, you know? You could match them, you could take specific parts and go greater, but you can't beat G-Rap. You can only match up with him, you know what I mean? If you're talking about techniques, you know, in that way. But in the last couple of years, really, to me, since 2000, you know, definitely 2018, 18, 19, 20, if you had to pick the most hardest, rugged, what people like to call lo-fi sound, you know, MCing, beat making, you know, where it sounds like it's produced below where, you know, Black Moon's Into the Stage was produced like, you know, a couple of floors lower than the basement, you know, beat miners was filtering their drums. You'd have the A-Preem sound. But we should get him on a phone soon enough. He's going to call in, though. While we wait for that, though. The place to get at A-Preem is apreem.bandcamp.com. On the book, I read a piece called, I called it Baji Chu. And it was off the review I put in there of his album, Darker, I think it's called Darker Realms, Higher Sciences. right? Darker realms slash higher sciences, and really a powerful work though, and you don't get a lot of MCs that are uncompromising, that are extreme, um, that are intense every single track. You know, you get MCs that really try to MC and give you, you know, like what Razcast says, you know, give you a diversity of sounds, ideas, think pieces, bangers. A Preem isn't really doing that. He's just giving you, you know, warrior anthems. You know, it's 14 tracks. It's going to be 14 bangers, though. They're all going to be different in the sense that they're a different song. You know what I mean? But they're all going to be bangers in that respect. But while we wait for A Preem to give us a call, let's get into some other things. You know what I mean? You know, I always like to get into those things about you know, what I call the trampling tweets and stuff. You know, one of the craziest tweets that I heard though was let's see if I find it here. And I want to do a whole show on it though, but usually people making claims and stuff. Let's see what you think about it though. I don't know. I know it's a really shoddy answer just because I don't know. I'm still thinking of what I would choose if I had to pick a record for that. But somebody tweeted, I don't know who it was a long time ago, but it makes good father. It said Benny the Butcher's Tana Talk 3 is the greatest trap dealer LP of the last decade. The last decade. So we're talking about since 2000. I'll take out 2010 just to be nice though. I don't even think Benny the Butcher had No, he had records. A lot of people don't know. A lot of Griselda albums sound totally different. You know what I'm saying? They sound totally different when you listen to them in the early years, where you get the early records, especially if you West Side Gun stuff. There was a release of some of his earlier work though. It sounds hardcore. It doesn't have that deep bass sound. Doesn't have that real, you know, what people are calling a lo-fi sound. Doesn't have it like that. It still would rank as boom bap. I would say Benny the Butcher's earlier stuff definitely sounds different than the early Griselda stuff. To me, it's a little bit more, and I mean this kind of like in a not so good way, but more trapped in the 2000s, in the dark ages, where the trap tracks and you know, they're more Swizz like beats, you know what I'm saying? Like those Swizz type tracks, you know, not really like Swizz, but there's a transition where, because the early 2000s is all Swizz, you know what I mean? Lots of treble, over treble, trying to make anthems, but there's no bass lines. The drums aren't filtered. Sometimes you don't, you know, there's no quality on the drums. And, you know, really it's that treble. So a lot of the banger aspect is the shrill that you get. That's what I used to hate, the shrill that you get on these records. And I always say, like, listen to Big Pun's 2 albums, you know, his official albums. Listen to Capital Punishment, and then listen to Yeah Baby. That would be the difference between boom bap and more the I had a word for it though. What was it? Pop hardcore? Popcore? I don't know. Because, you know, DMX records, you know, Rough Rider stuff, that is hardcore, right? It's hardcore. Right? It's hardcore. But it's slightly diluted and you can't really check for it. You don't really know how it would go, you know what I mean? Like what it means, you know, and what sense that does have, you know what I'm saying? But when I hear the early Benny the Butcher stuff, though, I forget the names of the Benny the Butcher stuff. I think I'll give you an example, because I got a record. It's a record with it covers the a billfold, I think, you know, just like rolled up bills. That's so cliche, right? You could have guessed that was the cover of this shit. You know, you try to be a completist of guys and stuff, and then you realize where they came from. You know, how like some of the early music isn't really worth recording. You know, some artists though, it's something I'll ask them, you know, some artists though, they have their music out and then they actually make the earlier music where they felt that it wasn't as good, or they felt like they really come into their own. Because you could do that now, right? you can't really do that like in the 90s and stuff. Guys are on record labels. They don't have control over their music like that. But like today, a lot of good MCs, not on some sellout stuff. Like they started sellout and then they found the hardcore groove. I'm just talking about like artists that they find their groove or they have a select year. Sleep Sinatra is a good example. You know, when you go to look at all of Sleep Sinatra out in Nebraska, all of his work, it's not all on Bandcamp. So like after around 2016 or 17, he stopped selling all of the early 2013, 14, maybe 2012 works, you know? They're good, but to him they didn't really capture everything he was doing. Or, you know, it wasn't into his prime, what I like to call into his prime. Because I definitely think it was a prime that he got into, like his own. And you could try as you might, you wouldn't really know. You know, the work is presented by the artists themselves. So how would you know? You wouldn't be able to, you know, figure it out. So there you go. You wouldn't find anywhere, you know, to get those records. They would be the definitive person to tell you, the artists themselves. So now you don't know. But let me see what the name of that Benny the Butcher album is. Yeah, it's a rolled up billfold. You know what I mean? What's it called? It's 2016. It's an album called One on One, like the number one on and then number one, you know, and it's just a rolled up billfold, you know what I mean? Like he's making that money. Yeah, yeah, no, but it's right, yeah, and that's it. That's all it is. And 2016. So even in 2016, they had a totally different sound. You know what I mean? And if you really hear the Griselda story, it seems that he was absorbed in because he was really talented. So it was like West Side and, you know, Gunn and Conway doing stuff, and then he was absorbed because he came into his own. You know what I mean? But that definitely is a record that, like, if you were collecting though, you wouldn't really need it in your collection to have like a good Benny the Butcher catalog. You know what I'm saying? But right now I'm gonna get into some more stuff because we're trying to get our guest online though, but he's not, you know, he's not calling in, so we'll have to reach out to him in some kind of way so we could talk about stuff. But definitely wanted to talk about his records. But you know, I was thinking about that. I think in this last decade, what I've called the invisible renaissance, I think the most impossible thing, because I'm still thinking about it, is to say what would be a classic trap kind of dealer record. I think what people would toss out immediately would be Pusha T's last record, right? Because it's kind of like a trap record, the one that Kanye did, and it's what people know. No, it's what people know. It's the I don't agree with that. The producers looking at me all crazy. It's crazy. It's not. Come on, it's not what I think. But I think that most people would think of that record first because it was very well known. You know what I'm saying? And in that Kanye burst in 2018, I think I only like the records as full records that he did with Pusha, and I think Tatiana Taylor, right? What's her name? Tiana Taylor, right? I'm going Fresh Prince of Bel Air here, right? But Tiana Taylor, those are good. You know what I mean? Because Kanye's good at R&B beats. Because most of his stuff isn't hard. It's perfect for, you know what I mean? He could make one hell of an album for Keisha Cole. You know what I mean? But where it's hip hop beats, but it's not really tough like that. You know, it's just flashy. And you know, it's not out of the box though. The first Keisha Cole album has Kanye beats, right? I don't know how many there are, but there are Kanye beats on the first Keisha Cole album. But Kanye is great musically as far as the able to make a hook. You know, that's one thing that he has along with Jay Dilla. You know, Jay Dilla. That's why people like Jay Dilla, and that's why a lot of producers, I think, a lot of producers I think are better than Jay Dilla, feel that Jay Dilla is better than that they are, and I think it's because, from everything I've read, even though I wouldn't agree, because I don't agree with artists, by the way, on their own work all the time. You know what I mean? A producer would go nuts, but you know, Ghostface, sometimes he'll talk negatively about Supreme Clientele. You know what I mean? Because, you know, he kind of felt like he wasn't being as creative. He was just saying whatever. and other times he won't. Redman has been very negative about There Is a Dark Side. I think that's his best record. You know what I mean? I think that's his best record. Is incredible. Um, but it's certainly one of the better ones, though. No, I'm not getting that either. Not a better one. Not top three Redman albums. Right? Maybe you might put What the album second because you don't like There's a Dark Side. I love There's a Dark Side. That's my number one. Then What the album, and then what's that '96 album? You know the yeah, that throwaway album, Muddy Waters. No, it's good. Everybody says Muddy Waters, but I think that's the simple album. I think they went. It's too simple for me. The beat wise, it's very basic to me. It's very basic to me beat wise. That's why I didn't really, Um, but it's incredible too. It's more addictive than There's a Dark Side though. When you get into it though, it's more addictive, you know. But and Redman had better hooks and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, his hooks were weird on There's a Dark Side, but that's why I like it though. He was making no damn sense on a lot of There's a Dark Side songs, you know. But I loved it for that. But how did I riff into Redman off of talking about the trap? Just like this idea of what the album is to pick though, and I was talking about Kanye. People would definitely put that Pusha T Kanye album up there. Here's why I say that it's a bad question to figure out, because you could always come up with a number one. The problem is that this isn't the. It's even worse than the '90s or even the 2000s. Definitely. In the '90s, if you said like a drug dealing album stuff, it's easy off the bat. Cuban Links is going to be the easy sign off. There could be others that could rival or be in the list, but you check the box on Cuban Links. It's a no-brainer, and the question's boring, and it's, there's nothing to argue. It's a good argument, but you could have multiple albums by individuals because of that. So, like, for example, off the head, because I'm looking at my book here, which focuses on a lot on 2018, I absolutely would put, what's his name? I would put Ito and Muggs. I would put their album on the list. You know what I mean? Let me see if I there's a section in my book, called the Crime Rhyme MCs, and that's the problem. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of the MCs that we could talk about, like I talked about Ito, Crime Apple, Daniel Son, Knowledge the Pirate, West Side Gun. Let's see here. Conway, of course, Benny the Butcher. Let's see who else we got here. El Camino, right? I focused on them, though, even though there are other parts, though, where other MCs are spoken about, because I didn't even mention Rock Marciano in there. If you had to say best trap album of the year, like drug dealing album or like hustler album, right? I don't think you would just say drug dealer album, right? We could call it a hustler album. I think that sounds corny, because all these rappers are not just hustling one product. Like, it's not just, And then where does it fit people that are clear hustlers on record, but they talk about all types of things, like a Planet Asia, right? He kind of defines himself as, he's hustling throughout all the records. So it's hard to box it in. But if we box it in, though, I don't know. I would say you got to put Ito and DJ Muggs up there. That album is definitive, and I think that Ito has made strong albums to put himself as. I thought he was the MC of the year in 2019, but it was also because he flooded so much good work. Though the other albums aren't as memorable; they don't pop up in your head as much. So you could dominate a year, like, oh, this guy made great work all year. What happens is, to me, what I found is that the next year after they do that, I'm not much in the mood to listen to him. If I heard 5 albums from a guy in 2019, 2020, I'm not trying to hear him until like June and shit. Like I'm a little bit bored. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I like the 5 albums per year. I think the guy that's mastered that best and not out flooded is probably SD. And the only reason I put that there is not because he's making records that are far above like if we're all, I'm mentioning all these elite Etho, Rome Streets, uh, SD, Planet Asia. They put a lot of records, but the only difference is that SD Nax records, they're all different on a abnormal level. Like he released an album though, with Superior on the beats, and he kind of made like he called it boleros. Boleros just is Spanish for ballads, right? But in in Spanish, that's a particular genre though of the which really includes the Mexican bolero though, which also delves into the Cuban bolero. So everybody's pretty much doing that style, and it's like a boom bap trap album. It's crazy. So he's doing things that he has certain like melodic notes in his delivery that are kind of like trappy. You know what I mean? Like where they do that, but it comes off with like there's a lot of bars. It's not like you go to the end of the song and you said, "Wow, he didn't say anything." There's actual verses and shit, right? Um, then what happens is this, right? The What also happens is SDNAC does a lot of work with Al Divino, and Al Divino gives him a lot of beats that are crazy. Um, I like in this though. There's a like one of the things in the 2000s that I was naively hoping would catch on was like the progressiveness of certain beat makers. Because one thing that about the music is that I was getting tired of just like the same breaks and stuff. You know what I mean? So like you remember when Little Brother blew up and stuff? I was kind of bored by those type of beats. They had bangers though. Like if I listen to Little Brother's first album, this is like blasphemy to a lot of like boom bap people, but the Listening album, 2000. When I heard that album, every single song sounds nice to me. Every single song. And when it came out an instrumental, I got the instrumental. I like all of them. They're all like. But I didn't want to hear that anymore. I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to hear something different. You know what I mean? So like, let's say like if the artists that we like Wu-Tang and stuff, because wow, remember 1999? People don't want to admit 1999 was a real fall-off year for Wu-Tang. They had a lot of subpar work in 1999. That's why Supreme Clientele is such a big deal in 2000. You know what I mean? You had Inspector Dex and Controlled Substance, which was a good album, but I reviewed the original and it was much more dirty. It was less clean. And then it was much more of a cleaned record. Raekwon's Immobilarity though. Come on, that was like beat wise, I mean Raekwon really a record I loved, but more because the lyrics really influenced me as a writer. So it's a beloved record with me. But the beats, they don't have the musicality. They have the quality, but not the musicality. Is Jizz's Beneath the Surface, right? A very good record, but again, we're in the disappointment of like no Liquid Swords. It's not, you know what I mean? So even the good records that Wu came out with in 1999, they're disappointing everybody. You know what I'm saying? What else we got? I'm trying to think of 1999. Oh yeah, You God. His debut album though, not a bad record, right? But You God is doing such a far left style, very choppy. Like when you learn, you get burned. Like everything's chopped up and stuff. So it's hard to get into. Like we're waiting for something for Wu to dominate again, and everything sounds like kind of progressive. You God made a good record if everybody else was doing good. Then we would have liked that record as like a nice side piece record. Describe a man's album as a side piece though. It's kind of damn. Let's rewind that. Kind of like a side piece. Yeah. Let's use side piece. It works though. It works, right? Side piece album. You know what I mean? Because you fuck with it after you fuck with the other stuff. But who else was in the Method Man? He had come out with an album in '98. RZA was in the middle of the Bobby Digital stuff, and even though that was really had a lot of progressive ideas, though there's a lot of things that he's doing in there that are next level. But to hear him rhyme like that and rhyme savage, it just, I don't think it's ever fully fit RZA. You know, never fully fit. You know? You know what's funny, right? I gotta think. RZA, as far as RZA, right? RZA's Bobby Digital is mainly about, like, most of the songs were about getting bitches, you know, getting women and stuff. I like RZA rhymes about women when he's not being Bobby Digital, per se. Like, if you have a lot of mathematics, right? Peace to God, a lot of mathematics. If you have his first album, right? I'm forgetting the name of his first album in 2000. I mean, that might be 2003 too, right? They got a song, and Ghostface used it. Yeah, Ghostface used it, so it might be earlier this album. But there's a lot of mathematics beat, and it was on a lot of mathematics album, and all the versions of it are produced by a lot of math, called Strawberries and Cream, and Ghostface is on it. You know, he's dope on it, but Riz is on it. But the way he's flowing sounds more like Bobby Steele's, even though he calls himself Bobby Digital. It has that more of that. You know how RZA was rhyming in Marvel, like that, like in Marvel, in that bonus track on Iron Man. That's how he was rhyming there. I like when he rhymes about women like that, where it has like that scientific bent, because it sounds funny when he talks about women and he starts throwing science and you know, drops the knowledge in there. It just sounds good. When he gets total savage Bobby Digital, it was lacking somewhat. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, 1999. That was a real weak year. That was a very lesser year for the Wu. You know what I mean? And what would have worked out for Wu is probably what worked out for us, though, that we were able to deal with it, was because 98 is probably the best year that Wu-Tang, the affiliates, the fam had. You know? Killer Army second album, Killer Priest Heavy Mental, Sons of Man debut. Those three records there will do you. But then you had Law of the Dark Man. That was a good record, though. You didn't think it was good. It was a good beat record. Law of the Dark Man had a lot of style. He's totally different. What else you had? You had The Swarm. You had the Capadonna, The Pillage. Right? So while Wu-Tang was kind of like stepping, not really coming hard, you had the other Wu fam affiliates, though, from 98 that was holding you off. You know what I mean? So it worked out, like, at least for me, as a listener, it worked out for me. You know what I mean? And it became, to me, in my mind, as an experimental year. And then Ghostface, you know, he saved the Wu. You know what I mean? That Supreme Clientele was something else. But when you go into the 2000s, speaking of progressive, we were kind of expecting some kind of progressiveness. Like, you had Boston's Mr. Lif. You had really, like, you had LP when he was doing Cannibal Ox. So you were like, wait a minute, where could the break beat go? You know, if you listen to the Cannibal Ox Cold Vein, and you always check out the instrumentals first. That way you can see the point easier. LP's not using break beats that no one's ever used before. You know what I mean? In fact, some of the songs he's using classical break beats. Right? But it's the musicality. It's the music he's choosing, though. He's doing different things with the music. It's you know, he's giving it more of a futuristic sound, you know what I mean? A more robotic sound, but without sounding corny, you know what I mean? And not in a dance funk way, you know what I'm saying? I kind of was hoping that the music would go in that direction, where we would get like more progressive ideas, people sampling different things, people changing structures, having that kind of daring and stuff. What's crazy is that that's why people, I think, they really flock to Jedi Mind Tricks. Because Vinnie Paz, though, really, on those albums, he doesn't really rhyme that great. You know what I mean? And they don't have lasting power because everything he was talking about, he's not really about. You know what I mean? He's not the God. He's not, if he's a Muslim, I don't know. Um, it's still wigger rap. It still ends up being wigger rap with one of Just Allah helping it out. The real jewel of those records, and they were never all released on instrumental. There's instrumentals you could collect. In YouTube you could find looped instrumentals. And you get your shit off. You're right. When you need an instrumental and you go on YouTube and you get that looped instrumental where somebody loops up the last 30 seconds and stuff. Sometimes you need that. You know what I mean? But here's the thing. The musicality to me was really what set off the great producers of the 2000s. And really making crate digging more varied. I think crate digging hit a rut by the end of the 90s, Not just in the breaks. Excuse me. Not just in the breaks, right? But in the music chosen. People weren't digging good music. That's why Alchemist, though, is so prized. Alchemist has a lot of crates. Focuses on a lot of indie rock, progressive rock of the 70s, right? He did albums where he's just sampling yacht rock, and he's calling it what he's sampling because nobody's sampling that. But as far as sampling, it's hard to beat and hard not to be impressed again and again with the samples that Stoop was throwing out there for Jedi Mind Tricks. You know what I mean? You go on Wikipedia and you see what he was sampling. He was sampling like classical music, but not the typical classical music. Sampling a lot of different stuff. Obviously, boleros and stuff. And to me, that really, sampling Mexican boleros and stuff, to me, the guy that really opened those crates was really DJ Muggs. And that may have been an influence in trying to capture a sound or reflect the sound because he was producing for Cypress Hill, Be Real and Sendog. Who knows? Who knows? Nobody ever asked him because, the journalists, they weak, they don't know. But what's interesting is that Stoop kind of takes that to another level. You know what I mean? So, you have like a bolero, and then, that banger comes in because a lot of those old boleros in the 60s and 70s, they got really nice isolated drums and they got really sharp guitars, they can't be stopped. You know what I'm saying? It definitely can't be stopped. That's definitely a thing. But yeah, it looks like I'm not going to have my guest, though. So we're going to go into a lot of other things that I have. I always have stuff for you, right? Yeah, but let me finish on that point, though, about this whole trap thing and everything like that, which obviously I haven't chosen. I haven't gone through it. You got a whole litany of great MCs that are rapping in the veins. So to me, it's like a veil. Or maybe it's clothing that they're wearing. It's not all that they're about. So that's why I don't like to judge an album like that. If I had to pick one, I'd probably say the Ito Muggs album because it's very significant. It's significant with these floods. It introduces one of the great MCs in this renaissance to go into this era, which is Ito. But there's others. You know what I'm saying? There's others. I'm just going off the head. We definitely could say Street Pharmacy, Rome Streets, and the beats the tracks that Pharma Beats made. Those are songs from there are gonna be memorable to us for years. You know what I mean? So that's one that has to be up there. That you could tie right there. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. The last record that Rome Streets did with the Artivist. You know what I mean? These records don't get a lot of play by themselves where you're left where hip-hop doesn't have that anymore. Where if people are left going to a particular record because it's really great, it isn't because it's greater than the others. It's because it's all you have. You know what I mean? today, no matter how great a record is, you're still going by mood. And if you're in the mood for, let's say, Ito, and you have so many albums, you're picking randomly, or you're just shuffling a whole year's worth, like Ito's 2019 work, and stuff like that. It's very difficult to isolate a record as far as what you thought was classic. And sometimes the term classic is going to be defined by its influence, its obsessive replay value, and things like that. And I don't think that those are measures that are possible right now. It's not possible as a collector. You know what I mean? Certain stuff, let's say that Napoleon the Legend has released. If he had only released that, excuse me, I would be happy. I would be content with that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have any problem with that. You know what I mean? So, a lot of that is, is important though. But I want to get into a second segment, saving the segment for a while, just in case, for a case like this, we might have to get A Prime on the show another time. But I'm going to take a quick moment. I'm going to grab a book that I want to talk about. And this particular book, right, where we're talking about this particular book, I have a segment that I was doing. I only did it once, and I really want to get back into it. You know what I mean? I'll try to make it hip-hop themed, music themed, so that way, I think that if we're talking about the hip-hop writer, books are crucial in the development of the hip-hop writer. I'll mostly focus on this show on hip-hop books, and music books, music-related books, because a lot of music books that are not about hip-hop are crucial to me in hip-hop. And certainly, since they're inspiring, they're inspiring books for me, not you, right? It's my show. And if it's a music book, I'm going to have to start with a book, and I guess we'll do this more of a, I guess, Puerto Rican themed, you know what I'm saying? But the influence of Puerto Ricans, and a lot of my work with that. So one of the first jobs that I ever got paid for in hip hop, not the first though, but one of the first though, was to be a consultant for the Center of Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College. I literally was signed up as a hip hop consultant. And there was a sister, Boricua sister, Puerto Rican, from that was doing her writing her dissertation, named Raquel Rivera, and she eventually got her PhD, and this was her thesis, what became of this book, from what I know. And she went on to write a lot of other books, a lot of other great works. She's also a very talented musician herself. So, when you look at sociologists and people that do sociological work, though, they're embedded in doing the arts, though. They're not just like looking out with it. No, her not in hip hop, but definitely in music of the Puerto Rican diaspora, which is the black diaspora in general. But her was writing what back then was a progressive topic, would seem more basic now, right? Because a lot of it has to do because her research exists, and the work that I and others put in. But her book that was her thesis, that became the book, is called New York Ricans from the Hip Hop Zone. So show you everyone watching here, right? You got this is one of the early murals of Pun. So it may not be familiar to people, but one of the early murals of Big Pun was this mural right here. I'm not sure if this is one of the Tats Crew ones. There's probably a credit here for the cover and stuff. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at this book in a while. Yeah. This is a Tats Crew thing. Yeah. And what a great book. You know what I mean? And I was one of the consultants, and this is around 1995. And what's interesting is that one of the ideas early in writing this book about Puerto Rican influence in hip hop was not just whether they were around or the amount of influence that they had, but also the identity that they had. You see, the conflict in Puerto Rican identity also conflicts with how they would be seeing themselves and how they engage in hip hop music. So, a person that sees themselves as black was taking part in hip hop, but seeing themselves as part of that hip hop scene as a continuum of black music. The intriguing thing, and this is not something in the book, this is something I'm adding on though, this is my understanding, okay? An intriguing thing is that, and of course I'm generalizing, a lot of times because of the Puerto Rican identity though, where we're allowed to say that we have black, but we are not of black, we often aren't ourselves identifying ourselves properly, in my view, as seeing ourselves as part of the black diaspora. So when we take musics that we have, we will admit that they are African-based musics, right? Because we play them black. We're using black instruments. We're using African instruments, conga, bongo, right? The timbale, right? All these things, right? The music is absolutely, like particularly salsa, rumba, bomba, plena. These are all genres of Puerto Rico. They're all polyrhythmic, you know what I mean? And that is something of the black diaspora. In fact, the polyrhythms of the black diaspora had to be reintegrated into American music. A lot of people don't know that. The polyrhythms weren't present in the drums in a lot of early black music. They were present in the type of style that they were playing, as in the best example being jazz. So like Dizzy Gillespie used to say that the polyrhythms were in the string section. For example, the back and forth between Charlie Parker, you know, the Bird, right, on saxophone, and Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet, and their interplay, polyrhythmic, different rhythms hitting at the same time for that rapid bebop, you know, that was moving at a mile a minute though, and so many things were happening. But the drums themselves, you didn't see that. You wouldn't find any blues, wouldn't find like a blues record where they were playing, two people were playing drums or anything like that. You know what I mean? And even then, a lot of the habits of the greatest black music, even after Puerto Ricans and Cubans bring that influence, that African influence, back into the music here in the United States, of polyrhythms, and of course bring it into jazz, right? The famous jazz tracks like Manteca or like, Vital, and they're reminiscent. But really, like for example, all of Dizzy Gillespie's records after, he has these great meetings with, Chano Pozo and others, and learns of Machito, Tito Puente, and all the great leaders, and Patato, and all the great players. All of his stuff, though, is really polyrhythmic, you know what I mean? A lot of great jazz records of the 60s, like, I'm just going off the head, like my man Kenny Burrell on guitar. His crucial records, his great records, they'll have polyrhythms, and they'll have Boricua percussionists, Cuban percussionists and whatnot. I don't want to leave you listeners in the dark here. Let me get that name of that record. It's so many records I collect, though I forget sometimes. And literally what happens is, unfortunately, is I have the album cover in my head, and then I don't have anything else. You know what I mean? It's the album with Soul Lament, which I love that. That's one of my favorite. Yeah, I was going to say this, but I didn't going to get it wrong. But in Midnight Blue, and if you look at Midnight Blue, you see some songs like Chitlins con Carne, because Ray Barretto plays congas on that, the legendary Ray Barretto. And the interesting thing is that something about hip hop, right, is that by the time, for example, by the time Raquel Rivera is researching this, by the time I'm trying to tell her about the roots about it and add on, the interesting thing is that a lot of Puerto Ricans feel that they have contributed, but a major issue in the New Yorkers from the Hip Hop Zone book that is tackled here is the identity of what Puerto Ricans are. And I'd like to read you a couple of segments, though, of the things that I had said originally. And this is stuff I said back in 95, right? I had said here, right, that it's the first page, the introduction, right? Hip hop, she says, furthermore, hip hop is a vernacular or native to a great many New York Puerto Ricans as the culture of their parents and grandparents. In journalist Edward Sunes Rodriguez's words, right, just remember, when you see early works, magazines wouldn't pay you if you just used like your righteous name. They wouldn't use your righteous name in a piece or anything like that, And so we can only use our righteous name, though, as like a middle name or something like that, and have it in quotes. And that's why, like, it became a thing in a lot of my early writings. But in journalist Edward Sunes Rodriguez's words, hip-hop is much a part of their lives as salsa and colonialism. So first off, I'm really end up being the voice here. And I didn't know this when it happened, but I end up being the contrary voice. That is basically, and to this day I know that I'm right about it, to note that this hip-hop music is part of the black diaspora, and it is part of our reality because we are part of the black diaspora. You really wouldn't be able to judge the musics of Puerto Rico, and that would include its offshoots that are developed here, like salsa, which is the first urban genre of New York City, right? A particular genre because it goes off son, has jazzed elements in this progression, and it also has a style of lyricism that is more detailed to the problems and the realities of what is going on. So salsa becomes a completely, definitely a genre of music. And to me, that's why I always say it's the first urban genre of New York City. The first music made in those ghettos, you know what I mean? Before hip hop. All those clubs on Jerome Avenue in the Bronx, before they were playing hip hop acts, they had all the great salsa acts. Willie Colon, Hector Lavoe, Ismael Quintana. They had, Willie Colon, Orchestra Harlow, everybody, all the Fania guys, right? So when Sonora Ponceña and Gran Combo would come over, everybody that was here, Peter Conde, Adalberto, Ray Barreto, Roberto Roena, everybody. But here's some interesting things here that I was the contrary voice, though, right? Suni is a Puerto Rican hip hop enthusiast and journalist. I'm still an enthusiast, right? I think I'm still an enthusiast. Enthusiasms, right? Shares the class dimension of Q Unique's argument. Me and Q Unique really disagreed in here. Probably, maybe still disagree to this day. He also proclaims hip-hop to be primarily the creative expression of urban youth and low-income communities. However, there's an important ethno-racial component to Rodriguez's formulation. Culture, this is me. Culture is a people's way of life. Hip-hop culture, thus, is a way of life of urban blacks and Latinos. This is before I got knowledge itself, though. So hip-hop was everything for me, though. You know what I mean? It is easily possible for anyone to contribute worthily and represent one or all aspects of hip-hop culture. However, they cannot have the same claim in a culture that an urban black or Latino has in it. For example, a white person may contribute enormously to an aspect of hip-hop, graffiti, DJing, MC, etc., and live in the South Bronx. Is he hip-hop? Yes, but only to a certain extent. And these are arguments that people like Lord Jamal would make about the visitors and guests in the house of hip-hop. These are things that I was saying back in 1995 and making a claim. So I said, whereas Rodriguez claims that hip-hop really is a black thing, and that includes Latinos and all African peoples, Q Unique has no interest in defining hip-hop's ethno-racial scope. And I think that I've always found that to be a problem, you know what I mean? To be a problem that, and I always have to talk about it. I don't know how Q Unique sees it now, but I disagreed with him then, and I certainly do when I read it again here. Puerto Ricans are never going to understand themselves if they don't understand that everything that they create is in the black diaspora. You know what I mean? It is percussively always in the black diaspora. It is rhythmically in the diaspora. And it is also in the framework of improvisation of the black diaspora. Improvisation, meaning, if you look at the musics of the black diaspora, they have something different that, let's say, European classical music doesn't have. And I will not be, we could take in the arguments of Beethoven was black from J. Rogers and others later, right? Right? We all know that gods start building stuff, right? And all that. And we could also take the arguments that, all string theory, which is really the origins of classical music, is from the Moors, right? So we know it's all a black thing, but, I digress. The idea, though, is that the black music that, all black music recorded in the last 2 centuries, right? We keep it there. Where probably in all of his recorded history, you have the most progression. There's the highest peaks of black genres, really all of them, and only defiled when we call it pop music, are when the musics themselves have exceptional improvisation. Right? I was going to use the other word, but it's hard to say, so I have to use improvisation. But they're improvised, right? And salsa is definitely there. Like, salsa literally is the framework of the son, the Cuban son. But it doesn't have these set, rigid structures for, a solo or an expressive solo. It's basically a creative solo. Even son, which is a much more rigid structure, has soneos, where the artists themselves are giving rhymes that verses that rhyme after every single chorus, a call and response. So this is in all the black music, you know what I mean? And so to not identify what we are creating, I don't care whatever you're doing, though. Everything that we do is always going to be within the realm of the black diaspora. Let's see something else I may have said back in 1995. I said a lot of right? Okay, let's see here. Really a great book. She goes into the 70s and early 80s, really gives you a context of the early MCs, you know what I'm saying? Early producers, all of that stuff, you know what I mean? She also talks about something that I used to talk to her about a lot, which is the idea of freestyle, and how freestyle was really kind of like, really, you got to say freestyle was an industry invention. A musical problem I've always found with freestyle is that they always took the lesser singer. Boy, they didn't really choose the best Puerto Rican singers out there. They really chose the best looking Puerto Rican singers, you know what I mean? And I say this with all due respect for my love for Lisa, my biggest crush, you know what I mean? But growing up as a kid. But they can sing well, but it's really dance music. But a lot of the stuff that they were making was really just R&B with hip-hop beats. So it really shouldn't have been put into such a distinctive separate genre, right? And here she talks about that too. And I said, while some celebrated the nominal interchangeability of freestyle with Latin hip-hop as rightful emphasis of freestyle ties and debts to hip-hop, others condemned it. Soonias, for example, argues that considering freestyle synonymous with Latin hip-hop leads to the idea that Latin hip-hop was different from real hip-hop and separated Latinos from real hip-hop. Again, an argument that Big Pun himself was noting in all his early interviews, right? Because Big Pun was actually an MC that he should have never been compared as amongst just Latinos. He really was dominant enough to be considered the best of his time. You know what I mean? So that was something else. Let's see what else here. I'm just reading off stuff I said. In an 95 interview, Soonias explained to me why some MCs refused to go the Latin rap route. Jeez. MCs don't want to come out as exclusively Spanish because they don't want to exclude people. Black people are their people. That was a lot of the reasoning too. I think as I learned over the years too, the industry was forcing Puerto Ricans that were evidently Puerto Rican. You know, if they're too light-skinned, and they can't pass for black, they wouldn't sign them because they were already by '95. It was already way past due, and the industry had come, taken over, and they were really defining, hip hop music as an African American genre. Even certain scholars make grave mistakes, like Imani Perry, and will write that hip hop is a African American genre with small contributions from other people of the black diaspora. So she considers the contributions of Kool Herc and the breakbeat and the sound system and the toasting to be small contributions. How erroneous is that? Like, you really missed the boat there. And that's why you can't really call hip hop just an African American rooted genre where you find that continuum like that, because a lot of the overt styles of rhyming, a lot of the ideas of rhyming aren't just rooted in soul music from jazz and bebop and stuff. They were coming out in all black music. So salsa was rhyming. They have rhymes all over it. Literal rhymes, like I mentioned with the call and response. And of course, dancehall, the way dancehall developed, So these are all things that were in the book. And I certainly think that this is, this book has stood the test of time, though. It was one of the landmarks. If you're trying to research what Puerto Rican history was in the beginning, its emphasis, this is definitely one that is very important. You know what I mean? I said some other stuff here. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, they had some thoughts about the word nigga, and I had some thoughts on that. That's from 2002. Pretty interesting. Because she did update the book, though. Right? One thing that the book does miss, though, it doesn't have a musical approach. It's all sociological. You know what I mean? And that's the only thing, though. But that's what I'm here for. But as far as the sociological history and the impact of Puerto Ricans and how they dealt with being parts of the music, parts of this culture, it also explains a lot of the reasons why it took so long through the 2000s for us to see Puerto Ricans rapping the way they feel comfortable with, and the fight that, and really puts real understanding and emphasis to the things that Thurston Howell and others have done. You know what I mean? But definitely a part 2 to that, because the inspiring book usually comes with an album I talk about, and we'll talk about that next show, and we'll try to get our guests back. We couldn't get to God, you know what I mean? But until next time, there'll be a lot more stories to tell, writings to recite, and records to rewind and reminisce. I'm your host, Soon Islam, a.k.a. Skillustrator Low, and as always, the Power Right Show is a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.